Did Chris Larson just dump his XRP at the top of the market again? In this video, I want to talk about what's going on here and whether or not this is bearish for XRP moving forward. A lot of people are pointing to a chart that shows Chris Larson selling his XRP at every single top. In this video, I want to talk about that as well as some big problems with Ethereum and why I think XRP is going to usher in a brand new narrative. Like always, your support means so much to this channel. Thank you to everyone who takes the time to like these videos and subscribe to the channel. These two simple things really do help me out so much. Also, if you have any place to buy some XRP, make sure to check out my favorite exchange upload down in the description of this video. With that said, let's jump right into it, and I hope you guys enjoy the content. So I want to start off and jump right into the Chris Larson news because I've seen a lot of questions on this today, and a lot of people are pointing to a chart that shows that Chris Larson only sells XRP at the top of the market. I want to jump into the post that started a lot of this confusion. This was put out here by an account that was essentially saying Chris Larson, co-founder, just offloaded 50 million XRP. Still buying the hype. He's cashing out. You're holding the bag. Essentially making it seem like Chris Larson is just dumping XRP left and right and essentially making it so that you, the XRP purchaser, are scooping up his liquidity. I want to start off and put to bed one simple narrative, though, and that's that Chris Larson is always selling the top. As we can see, Chris Larson did a huge sale right before XRP took off. He also happened to sell some XRP near the top and then sold some more XRP near the local bottom. Chris Larson is constantly selling off of small positions of XRP. And the reason he's doing this is the same exact reason why a lot of other people who own XRP will ultimately sell out of some XRP. It's just to raise profits. Chris Larson's got a lot of things going on, guys, whether people understand that or not. He's a very active business person. He has a lot of interest in XRP, in Ripple, and outside of it. It's not necessarily a bad or evil thing. He was one of the creators of the XRP ledger. For God's sake, he deserves to be rewarded for what he brought to this ecosystem. But the story does get a bit funnier, because it turns out that all these people reporting that Chris Larson dumped his XRP weren't even correct. The full story is that Chris Larson is not dumping his XRP. And in fact, he moved 50 million XRP, but to invest that 50 million XRP into Evernorth, the new XRP treasury management company being launched. Now, I am super excited about this XRP treasury management company because this is going to bring in brand new liquidity to the XRP ledger ecosystem and going to prove out things like DeFi on the XRP ledger. Additionally, they're doing this in a really interesting way. All the other Bitcoin treasury companies we've seen have had one huge problem, and that's the fact that you are creating a treasury company, but not having anything for that treasury company to monetize. All these Bitcoin treasury companies are accumulating mass amounts of Bitcoin under the promise they won't be selling any Bitcoin, but they don't have any business plan to generate profits. Therefore, they are taking out a bunch of debt they own money on. They're saying they're not going to sell the Bitcoin to raise cash to pay off that debt, and they have no explicit business plan to generate profits to pay off the debt from the loan they took out to purchase the initial Bitcoin. So it's kind of a dead-end company product that we've seen out of a lot of these Bitcoin treasury management companies. It's easy to take out a loan. It's easy to use that loan proceed to buy Bitcoin. What's hard is using that Bitcoin to generate some kind of profit to pay out the debt payment or the note on the initial loan. And this is something that Michael Saylor and a lot of Bitcoin treasury companies have struggled with. But this XRP treasury company, Evernorth, is coming forward with the explicit goal of using that XRP in DeFi in the market to generate profit. So it's a real company with a real business model that can actually service the debt, pay investors, and run a scalable operational business model. Now, this for me is super exciting. It actually shows that you can run a treasury company that can generate profits. It proves out the XRP ledger as being a functional ecosystem and not a dead-end pet rock ecosystem, kind of like what we're seeing Bitcoin become. And it really just, once again, puts to bed the narrative that Bitcoin is the only digital asset out there that's useful. And in fact, Bitcoin is dropping in utility every single day. And what is being delivered in the XRP and Ripple ecosystem is consistent utility, consistent products that bring real world value. This is once again just another example of that. And I think it's so funny to see these narratives twisted. Everyone ran to X to talk about Chris Larson dumping his XRP, getting out of the XRP ecosystem. What's he really doing? He's building in a brand new business model, brand new utility, and a brand new proof of concept for the XRP ledger. So overall, it's all really exciting. And it goes to one of the bigger, higher arching points that almost no one talks about, which is why does Ripple really want this XRP treasury company created? And in my opinion, it's actually super simple. Ripple thinks the price of XRP is going much higher. Dom put out an excellent post earlier today, and I think he just outright said it. You don't launch a treasury company unless you believe the price is going much higher, and if Ripple believes the price is going higher, you best believe it also. I don't think there's any question out there that XRP being at a very high price is not only good for us, but very good for Ripple and everyone in the XRP ecosystem. Everyone wants to see a higher priced XRP, and just like you and I think XRP will be significantly higher in the future, so does Ripple. It's just positioning inside this ecosystem. People see what's coming. They see the utility. They see the ETFs. They see these announcements, and they're positioning themselves. They know XRP is going to be a higher price, and they are going to do everything in their power to take advantage of that appreciation. It's not just people like me and you. People on the inside of Ripple know what's coming, and they want to position themselves for what is around the corner. Overall, Ripple accumulating XRP in masses is only a bullish sign and shows that their confidence is not only in their business, it's not only in what they are doing for clients, but also in the digital asset XRP. There's no other reason they would be accumulating it in mass and putting out treasury companies to benefit from XRP's price performance. Guys, if XRP goes to a lot of the prices that people think it will, Ripple will be one of the most powerful companies in the world. Everyone in this ecosystem is highly incentivized to see XRP at a higher price. And in my opinion, all the things we are seeing on the fundamental side are just waiting to send that price higher. Now, with that said, there are other ecosystems, in my opinion, that are not having such an easy time with the institutional adoption we're seeing. One of those being the ETH ecosystem specifically. Over the weekend, during the AWS outage, we actually saw Infura go down. Now, Infura is essentially, for lack of an in-depth analysis, a critical piece of software used in the Ethereum ecosystem. Guys, Ethereum has been running into a lot of issues recently. Whether it's on failed transactions, whether it's on extremely high fees, whether it's on things like we're seeing right now with critical infrastructure going down. The Ethereum chain, in my opinion, is really proving out things we've talked about a very long time ago, which is that it was never ready for prime time. A lot of people don't know this story, but I think it's an important one to tell. Before Ethereum was even a thing, the XRP ledger was already up and running. When the XRP ledger was up and running, obviously, Ripple was later created to help create a business proposition around the XRP ledger. Guess who one of the first interns at Ripple was? It was actually Vitalik Buterin, the creator of Ethereum. Vitalik interned at Ripple and brought the idea of bringing smart contracts to the XRP ledger. And while this idea was really interesting to Ripple, it was ultimately turned down. Ripple wasn't interested in bringing smart contracts to the XRP ledger because they knew they ultimately weren't really necessary. Smart contracts in its current form and with what Vitalik was proposing were way too bulky. It was going to destroy the entire purpose of the chain and make the XRP ledger inconsistent and bad for payments, XRP's primary use case. With Vitalik bringing forward this idea and ultimately being rejected, he ultimately went off to create Ethereum. Ethereum had a ton of success because it was a test bed. You could build anything you wanted instantaneously, and boom, you had a blockchain ecosystem with programmable money. It was a great idea, but in my opinion, Ripple was right from the start. Despite Ethereum's success, it's now sitting in a position where it wasn't built properly to scale. And no one actually wants to use the chain because all the efforts that were put into it for programmability are now biting it because it can't scale any of this functionality. Ethereum is essentially turned into a test bed of great ideas, but things that can't possibly execute at the scale that is needed in order for them to become full-fledged products. What did Ripple instead to do? They moved things to a sidechain and are working on different forms of programmability on the XRP ledger that won't have the same hurdle points that Ethereum has. The entire cryptocurrency industry has been very quick to jump into these different things, not understanding that the build out of this industry was going to take time. While certain people rush to conclusions to build out functionality that might be useful but might be hurtful, Ripple sat back with XRP and waited to understand what was going to be needed and the best way to do it to preserve the real value of cryptocurrency, which is moving value over the internet. Anything that compromises the mission of moving value over the internet is ultimately not something suitable for blockchain technology, or at least not the XRP ledger. And this very simple mindset is what has prevented the XRP ledger from going down the same path as Ethereum. Remember what I said earlier in the video? Ethereum was actually created after the XRP ledger, but the XRP ledger still trumps it in functionality, speed, and efficiency. That's because a lot of things were rushed in the Ethereum ecosystem, and people were super quick to try to win the DeFi race, only to find out that now we're sitting here. The XRP ledger is positioned to scale in this DeFi race, and most of the institutions aren't even here yet. Ethereum is lacking the actual capability to handle the volume they're going to need, and now people are writing it off as essentially a failed project or an early experiment. The Ripple team is always 10 steps ahead of the rest of the industry, and the sooner you start to understand this and see why the XRP ledger is built the way it is, the sooner you'll realize that Ripple has always been on a different time frame than the rest of the industry. While the rest of the industry was focused on building up as much retail volume as possible, Ripple focused on the institutions. And now while the rest of these different ecosystems are floundering to try to figure out what will be needed to get the institutions on board, Ripple's already been working with them for years. Guys, this is a clearly different path, but honestly, the path that has always attracted me to XRP over the rest of these ecosystems. Thank you so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed this update, and for now, Mickle out.